So good morning, no, afternoon, everyone. It is 12 noon, and welcome to another Zoom to Facebook Live session. We are here today with Adam Brown, who is a chartered professional accountant of Vanguard Accounting. Adam, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today. We wanted to take a little bit of your lunch hour today. Obviously, with everything going on in the world today, we wanted to discuss a couple of the topics around why you want to work with an accountant. And so we're going to talk to Adam today about why it's important, COVID or no COVID, why it's important, employee or self-employed. What to look for, and who, or I guess the process into which you would look to hire a specific individual to work with, as well as then some of the hot topics around the pandemic, some of the key changes, and I guess re-entry back into opening doors. So Adam, do you want to give us a little bit of a background as to who you are, where you've come from, and about your business?
Yeah, so name is Adam Brown. Yes, I'm a CPA. I originally started in one of the big four firms. After that, I decided that I wanted to go out on my own and help small business owners and to understand some of that information that was out there. So I've done that 3 years ago and been working with them since then. Outside of that, originally from Newfoundland, not from Vancouver originally, but ended up out here roughly 8 or 9 years ago.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you did. Glad you made the move.
Yeah, if you hear a little bit of an accent, that might be where it's coming from. So, yeah.
So we did post, or I guess record a few months ago, a video together about working with an accountant, and we addressed just slightly some of these first few questions in regards to why it's important to work with an accountant. So can you give us, obviously you're biased, but can you give us some of the reasons why it is important to work with an accountant? And, you know, everything's sort of paintbrushed over with COVID, but COVID or no COVID, why it's important to work with an accountant?
Yeah, there's a lot of different people that come up to me at different times in their life for different situations. I try to kind of break it down into kind of 3 points as to why it would be good to work with an accountant. Yeah, the first one ultimately is clarity. So obviously at this period, the tax returns are due at different times and payments are due at different times depending on what type of business or employee you are. But that's ultimately moved off your shoulders onto the accountant to kind of track that. They're the ones that are going to be reaching out to you, just saying, hey, time to do this tax return, time to deal with this. So you don't really have to think about it, because I do get a lot of people come in that are late on multiple filings just because they got busy, and that happens, right?
Yeah.
The second point, it's usually cheaper. And the reason I come up with this is that a lot of people come to me after something has happened or after they've received a notice or something of the sorts. It's a lot harder to change something after the fact versus before the fact. So this can happen at different times. Let's say you're selling a home or you're moving into a new home and you're renting out a home or something like this. There's a lot of things in life that will have effects for taxes, and people just don't have that knowledge every day. Just there in mind, oh yeah, I got to think about this, I got to deal with that. Yeah. So usually when there's big life changes, it's always good for just a quick call, quick email. Hey, I was thinking about doing this. Do I have to be concerned with anything? And at least if you have that relationship with an accountant, they can get back to you, probably a quick email or whatever, and just say, yeah, you're good. Or, hey, let's look at these couple things just to make sure that moves smoothly and we don't have to worry about the CRA coming back and wanting a lot more information and such.
I find a lot of people who are self-employed are great at their craft, but they're not so great at the books of their craft. So they do get behind in these papers, these documents, the cash flow planning, and it becomes a mess.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? People start their business to do that. That's what they love. They typically did not start the business to do bookkeeping and accounting and that sort of thing. So we kind of take that on in that situation. I guess the last point is just confidence. You have someone that is familiar with tax law or is familiar with the rules or familiar with the CRA. A lot of people, if they get a call or a letter from the CRA, it's like, what is this? And they get a bit hesitant and a bit fearful. While we've looked at it, okay, we're good. From another side, we also get into investing and how to invest. And a lot of different investment advisors come out and they have their plan in mind, but it may not be that best plan for you. So it's a good sounding board, a second opinion that's not biased as to which way you go with your investments. It's just what makes sense for you. So they're kind of the main couple of reasons that is for working with an accountant ultimately.
Yeah. And as if you are an employee, I mean, self-employed for me, no brainer.
Yeah.
But if you're an employee, you know, what are the main highlights there? I guess you touched on one, and obviously, you know, in my world, in my profession, real estate, transition of real estate, writing off of any portion of home space, especially this year, right? With people working from home.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking into for next year. You know what I mean? For your 2020 tax return. Yeah, for an employee, there's definitely reasons. So everyone usually has investments, and that can include the home, right? That in some people's situation, that is an investment. And so what I get a lot is people who have a home or apartment or something. They may move to a different province, but they may want to keep that property. Okay, there's things that we can do to kind of save on some of that capital tax if you sell it down the road. There's also things to do in terms of, okay, two people are moving in together. What does that mean for our properties and principal residence and that sort of thing? So there is that. There's also from an investment side. Okay, someone has a pension plan. Well, it doesn't make as much sense to put into their RSP versus the other individual. You know what I mean? If you think about long-term, your retirement plan and how that's going to work. So yeah, there's multiple reasons. I get a lot of people stock options, that sort of thing with their work, just planning that as to when to sell those or trip those, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of things that come up.
I guess too, people get advice from friends, family, people that have been through something similar, but you have to address the advice to that person's particular situation because it's not copycat. It's not, I did this 10 years ago. The same thing applies today.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's situation is different. And so you need to come with a different solution for every individual because what works for someone, it will not necessarily work for the next person. Also, there's time in that factor and things could have changed. So if it was 5 years ago that someone did this, that might have changed at this point in time. So like 5 years ago, we didn't have to disclose that we sold a property. You know what I mean? And now you do. So there are things there with that. Honestly, to upkeep a relationship ultimately with an accountant from an employee perspective is usually not too expensive. It's just your yearly tax filing. And that way they have a bit of understanding of who you are, your background, and what your kind of goals are. Because that's the other side of it. I may recommend something for someone, but not someone else because I know what they're thinking and what their goals are in the future. Yeah.
So, okay, we've basically said you need an accountant. So
yeah, like you need a mortgage broker, right?
How do you choose? I mean, in any profession, there's 1,001 people you could choose from. So how do you choose the right person to work with?
Yeah, the one caveat I'll say that goes to a technical side is looking for a CPA. First off. So there are people out there that are completing tax returns that are not CPAs, and they're more of a tax preparer per se. Versus a CPA, usually they first have that designation for one, so they have a baseline level of experience. But also there is some legal liability in that context that CPA is preparing your tax return, not so much on the other side from someone that's not designated, doesn't have insurance, and may have varying levels of experience. So that would be the one technical side. I don't actually get asked that a lot if I have my CPA. Granted, is in my name and on my email, but it's not something that a lot of people ask me.
But it is prudent to check licensing. I know we're licensed, and you can check on our regulatory body website as well that our license is current and in good standing. So I would recommend anyone doing that is checking the licensing in any profession.
Yeah, you can definitely do that through CPABC as well. You could look up by name and you see, is there a current standing member? If you looked up by name as well, if there was any disciplinary proceedings, that might come up as well. So that's probably, as you find a CPA, that could be another check. You know what I mean? But that's from the technical qualification perspective. I think the next two things are more about your fit. And you first have to be comfortable with your accountant. You have to be able to feel comfortable asking them questions or approaching them. I find a lot of people don't do that, and because they're like, oh, I might get billed for this or whatever. Honestly, for myself, if it is a call or you just pick my brain or something like that, I'm not typically going to charge you for that. You know what I mean? If I'm doing your ongoing engagement every year tax return, I'm not typically charging for a 5-10 minute call or a quick 1 minute reply to an email. I consider that just maintaining that relationship. Also, I would like you to reach out so that we could avoid those issues versus it being more costly on the other end, right? So I know I've met some people that they had a previous accountant, they were not comfortable asking them questions for whatever reason. They just didn't feel comfortable doing that. So I think that's the first one. And then I think the second one is cooperation. And that is, you have to be able to get along. You have to be able to somewhat like that individual, to be open and to discuss with that individual. It's ultimately the fit, I'll call it. If you have a good fit, then it's going to be a good relationship from there. And then lastly, if you are in a certain industry that has certain particulars, you probably would want someone that has some knowledge or experience in that field. The major ones that are out there, if you're like in mining or farming, those sort of things, definitely there are specialty credits for those and different tax rules for that. So you definitely would want to make sure you have that experience from there. But otherwise, just generally that they do operate within that field, so that they have a baseline of knowledge of what you do and what you're concerned about.
So let's move to the hot topic of the last few months, COVID and pandemic changes. So what are some of the high level top changes that you've seen? Obviously the one of delaying for tax filing.
Yeah.
Or tax filing and tax payment.
That's right. Yeah. So the bigger tax filing was pushed off a little bit. I think more people are enthused about the deferral of the tax payment, which was August 31st for most individuals. So that is probably a big one for most people. It also helps out in a family unit. If one person's in a refund and the other person is in owing balance, well, you can file, get your refund, and then use that refund to pay the owing balance. And so it works out that way. But that's the first one. For employees and self-employed individuals, this is the CERB, right? The $2,000 every 4-week period. They did open that caveat that you could make $1,000 within that period. So that is great for self-employed individuals. They don't have to completely go silent on the business. They still can do stuff. You may want to look at if you have projects where you want to plan those projects to make sure you stay within those guidelines. But that is definitely a help. The other ones move into a little bit more if you're a bigger business or you're incorporated, and that's like the Canadian business account, which is that $40K loan where 25% of it may be forgiven if you follow certain protocols. Mm-hmm. The big roadblock with that one is you need to have had payroll, so employees, in the previous year, and you had to pay out $20,000. So that's the one hiccup for people when applying for that. If you have employees, all good. It usually is fairly quick application. And then outside of that, you got the emergency wage subsidy, which I think I was just hearing that they might extend later because it's initially put out for 3 months.
Yep.
And they're just seeing how this whole thing works out and if they have to extend some of these benefits, you know what I mean? So,
Adam, what are the top questions that you're receiving on those items that you've mentioned?
yeah. So first one is, does dividend income count as salaries? And unfortunately, no. So some people, business owners in particular, they can take salary or dividends, right? The salary is seen as, payment for your time of putting into the business, while dividends is seen as your return on your investment in the business. And so they're treated differently from a tax perspective, and dividends is not seen as income from a CEWS perspective, or the 40K loan at this point. That would be the first one. The next one, we had a lot about the 1K, the CERB, and can I make income and stuff like that. I get a lot of ones about business owners and how does that work with my pay, and can I get that? Because there is a lot of specialty rules in place for some of these programs if you are the business owner. So I definitely would recommend seeking advice on those ones, because you can get tripped up in that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I find just trying to review them for clients that are asking, obviously I don't offer tax advice, but even trying to read through and understand these programs, it's entirely confusing. So, and
Yeah.
this is, this is not foreign to me. The language isn't foreign, but I can't figure it out. So I assume you're getting a lot of phone calls, but the challenge with that is, unless you're already working with these clients,
Yeah.
you have to bring them on some sort of engagement, like fee for advice,
Yeah.
because of the legalities around offering advice.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, and that's the bit of the balance, right? People are hurting, but at the same time, it is the legalities of it. If I provide advice to someone, I'm held liable for that advice. So, yeah, there would be some sort of engagement. What that would look like just depends on the business. But yeah, in terms of terms, the big one, non-arm's length employee or versus an arm's length employee. That's a tax term. That's not like an everyday term that people, oh yeah, I know what that is. No, it's they're tax heavy per se with their releases, because it's the CRA that's releasing them. So
yeah. So what about transition out of this period and into the next? So it's sort of like, okay, we've had the slow shutdown. We've come into this new phase. Now we're coming into the next phase of reentry, and there's a whole slew of new questions coming as to how you do that. And can you speak to that as it relates to your services and how you help with that?
yeah, and that gets a little bit more into like business advising and probably gearing some of that advice to that. And so it is going to be interesting, because you're looking at a gradual opening up of businesses. So depending on what industry you're in, it might come on sooner or later. You know what I mean? And I think there's going to be some industries that will have a delayed effect. So, for example, designers, interior designers, like their projects are longer term, 6 to 8 months. So their hit on their revenue is more going to be seen maybe in the summer and the fall versus right now. So those people have to be prepared for that and pushing money to the side, because some of those resources that we're talking about are not going to be as accessible at that point in time.
Yeah, I was having that conversation the other day. It's like for some of those professions, it's a delay, and then the programs aren't available. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, and if there's enough people in your industry in that situation, then things will come out. But and you can push that to your MP and upwards. Yeah, it's gonna be hard. But at the same time, you got to also think about. I'm thinking about 2020 or later, and okay, how's the repayment going to work? How's taxes going to work? Because a lot of these are taxable benefits. So you will have to pay taxes on those come your next year tax return. So you're going to have to pay a little bit more out of pocket than usual for that. So it is something to be aware of and keep in mind. Maybe save a little bit more on the side for that.
Yeah. And how has your industry changed, or I mean, other than the actual specifics,
Yeah.
has how you do your job, other than obviously doing things remote and nothing face to face, but has your industry changed?
No, like, it depends on the firm, I think. Like, there's a firm and then there's an industry, you know what I mean? So I think there's still the demand for work. This is during tax season. So it's usually most firms' busiest time of year. There's a bit of people that may be waiting on completing some stuff for that, but um, less in-person meetings, obviously, more Zoom meetings, stuff like that. More discussion around business continuity, like, hey, are we going to have that cash flow? What do we got to think about? What's coming up? Those sort of things versus what's my tax. So we're looking at more future focus than past focus at that point in time. And maybe it's pushed through some stuff with the CRA in terms of electronic signatures and such that make things a bit easier, but it's still a work in progress. So
Yeah. Well, it's nice to know that you're here and available for anyone. How do people get a hold of you if they are looking to ask you follow-up questions or engage with you as their accountant?
yeah, the easiest way is shoot me an email, adam@vanguardcpa.ca. That would be the easiest way. Just shoot me a quick email. We'll plan a call. And then take 15, 30 minutes to discuss kind of your situation, how we could help, that sort of thing. And we kind of go from there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'll filter through. I haven't seen any questions come up, but as this video rolls out and people are available to watch it, not live, there might be some questions. We'll be sure to answer those in the Facebook feed or on YouTube, wherever and everywhere we post the video. But if anyone is working with an accountant that they're not getting advice from, don't enjoy, haven't looked to engage one, needs one, or wants to have a conversation with Adam about how he can specifically help you, please do reach out. He is obviously open, as he says, for those calls during this time. But maybe if it's not urgent, after tax time.
Yeah. It's always a good time. You always will get more time, and then if you call in July and August, you'll get a little bit more leeway on that call than if at this point in time. But yeah.
Awesome, Adam. Well, thank you for taking your time. Thank you, everyone at home, for watching or on your phones. Hopefully, if some of you are outside enjoying the sunshine, and we will talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.